is the Jeff Santos Show.
.33 past the hour. It is the Jeff Santos Show that you are tuned into. We're here every Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 Eastern Time. And, of course, 12 to 3 Pacific Time. Folks, one of the big news items that we just barely mentioned at the top was the ownership issue of the CNN, which I have had my issues with over the last couple of years, but now being bought by Oracle, Larry Ellison, who's bought TikTok, of course, CBS, a disgrace of that network, trying to get rid of Stephen Colbert, the progressive host, if you might, late night host. That may have an effect, by the way, on the Taylor-Rico Crockett race coming up on Tuesday. You had Taylor-Rico on just a week ago or so. Well, anyways, obviously, if you haven't been under a rock, the CBS owners now have bought Paramount, their corporate company, has bought the folks at Time Warner, which includes HBO, which includes CNN, and that is bad news for journalism, bad news for those who work for CNN, of course. But there's an article in the American Prospect, and of course we talk to Harold Meyerson every Monday. His boss, or if you want to call it that, they're all in the hierarchy, as is Meyerson is the editor at large of the great magazine. But David Dane, who we've had on the show in the past, has this thing that basically not so fast that to do this. California and our friends at KCAA are well aware of this. The Attorney General there, Mr. Bonta, is saying not so fast. There is an opportunity to investigate this deal because it has ramifications on the economy in Southern California, in Los Angeles, and also in other parts of the country too. So they are going to look into this and potentially could hold this thing up. There have been issues whether you could potentially take CNN out of the deal. Because that involves a news network, if it's one thing to, the movies and other things, which are also, important to the society. But so this is something that, we're going to look into here. And I think it's going to be very important. As I said at the top, I'm hoping that ABC News Live, which is on a lot of different streaming systems. I know it's on mine and cable outlets, that they could incorporate, some folks at CNN if this deal ends up going through, and give MS Now, which is by far the only corporate. There's some other, that are not on the corporate side that do progressive television, progressive populist work. But I'm hoping that there is more. All right, I believe we have connected with Mark Taylor-Canfield. Is that right, Jalen? All right. Well, he is the Renaissance man of the Jeff Santos Show. He is a musician. He is an activist. He is, of course, the executive director of Democracy Watch News, longtime contributor to the Jeff Santos Show. We welcome my good friend with guitar in hand, I believe, as we open up the screen. There he is. He's got an acoustic guitar. A little bit different today. Mr. MTC, welcome, my friend. How are you?
Out on the west side, they got lots to do now. They drive their Harleys down on Alki Beach. And if you do it, you might lose your shoes. Because when the sun goes down, it's a freaky little town. I don't know if it's ever gonna happen to you, but I know we're gonna find a very own. In the middle of the zoo, it can happen to you, to you, to you, to you. That's my new song.
Hey, MTC in the house, a new one, new guitar too,
That's
man.
my song about Seattle. Yeah, it's called Freaky Town, and it's up at the NPR Tiny Desk Concert Contest website now, so people can go check that out. They just
Awesome.
contacted me and let me know that it's up there. So if you go to Tiny Desk Contest at npr.org, you'll get it. And yeah, I'm up there with a lot of other people a lot of really talented people that get involved with that event every year. And I was thinking that, like, playing this guitar and thinking about the ones behind me, maybe sometime we should just have like a segment like Mark's guitar segment where I talk to people about guitars, because there's a lot of history involved. For instance, this one back here is kind of a Les Paul style electric guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that Jimmy Page would play, right? But the other one that Punky is hanging on right now, my
Yeah, by the way, is that your
marionette.
jacket, or is she cold?
That's her dress, actually. Yeah.
Oh, it's her dress. Okay.
Yeah. Here, Punky, say hi.
She's in for
but this is the guitar behind her is
Punky?
an SG style guitar, right?
Oh,
So that's the kind that Frank Zappa would like to play. And this is Punky Spookarina, everybody. If you haven't seen her on the live stream, she's my rock and roll marionette that I perform with sometimes. And she has her own guitar she plays. She also has an electric guitar. But yeah,
by
so
the way,
all
you
these
can
years,
see the Punky and the entire Mark Taylor-Canfield on the JeffSantosShow.com. We place it on our website. So for those of you who are not driving now and listening to KCAA or the Grade 8 stations in Wisconsin, you can go to the JeffSantosShow.com. It is our Fun Day Friday, and Mark is really not only the caboose of it, but it's the big part of it too. As we talk to him every Friday, as we have for many years here on the Jeff Santos Show. So I guess the question is, do you take does she take the glasses off at night to go to sleep, or does she keep them on all the time?
All the time. Rock stars always wear sunglasses, even in the shower. Yes, it's very important that you keep your sunglasses on.
Just wanted to know that. Yeah,
I learned that from Roy Orbison, by the way. So
is that right?
Roy Orbison, if anybody knows who that is, yeah, it's a very famous 50s pretty woman walking down the street. No, but I was thinking, Jeff, is that we've been playing all these guitars for years, right? They always have these tech innovations that come along, like AI and digital recording and all this. It's going to change everything, right? But I'm telling you something. We're playing the same guitars that they played in the 1950s, folks. Sometimes technology doesn't get better. It reaches a plateau. Stuff. That violin behind me, that was what, 1500s? And the design has not changed, because once you reach a certain point, especially with musical instruments, hey, there's nothing to change. This guitar right here is a Fender acoustic, which is very rare. They normally make electric guitars, very famous ones like the Stratocaster. That's what Jimi Hendrix loved to play. The Telecaster, which is kind of a more country rock, kind of twangy kind of sound. And they have a lot of great guitars through the years, but this is actually an acoustic. And actually, I think it might be my favorite as far as acoustics go. And I have multiple, but this one is very professional.
You love your guitars, man.
Especially if they're black.
I was thinking about
black or red. It's my favorite.
It's a really great looking guitar. Let me ask you this, because I know I'm always trying to bring things together here. Sometimes it goes off the cliff, but it's all right. So one of the things that I find is that you have great things and they try to mess it up with technology. I'm all for technology, the AI stuff now and so forth. But, we're talking about baseball early in the whole analytics mode. It takes the fun out of, the guy trying to steal second base. Sometimes he steals third, Ricky Henderson. And we're talking about that with our great baseball historian, Galen White. And I think about the idea, as you just mentioned, that these guitars, have been working, since the days of Chuck Berry, since the days of the Animals and the rock bands of the 1960s. And I just look at this and I'm thinking, well, if it's good enough for Clapton and Page, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't get this idea that, we can tweak this and AI that, and it basically was more money for the billionaires when you get down to it. And that, which gets me to another issue that I just brought up, the idea of taking over more and more journalism, something you have always been concerned about, and people actually the danger zones, and I'm not talking about the Kenny Loggins stuff either, but the idea of a real concern. CNN may be, Fox News light, come if the California Attorney General, Mr. Bonta, can't figure out a way to stop this, or maybe get CNN as part of out of the deal that Paramount is just about to secure. And of course, they get the rubber stamp DOJ there, and Bondi, who should be basically part of the orange suit that our friend the president of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue should be wearing. But that's going to be rubber stamp. But to me, this is just another example of protecting what you have, because it's been great. It's great to have a number of different networks. People who are conservative, they have Fox. People who are more moderate, they watch CNN. People more progressive, MS Now. You get rid of that, and it becomes more right wing all the time. What is that? It ends up being a dictatorship, is what it is, and we're seeing elements of that right now. Your thoughts on this? Because I tell you, we got to look at the past, and I always look at FDR as the good past. You can go back to the racist past. I understand that. But you don't want to go there. But there are some things that we need to really cherish. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I keep saying, the J.P. Morgans and the oligarchy and the Wall Street speculators who ruin our economy every few years, they are still around, and they still have their puppets in government. And now it's like a revolving door. So the Wall Street crowd supports somebody like Trump, and he becomes a dictator, and only certain parts of the 1% actually are benefiting from this. Meanwhile, I have to say this, Jeff. I heard the interview you did with Nancy Pelosi, and great job. I'm so glad to see her actually giving you a lot of creds, which was really cool, because I've known you for years, and I know all the sacrifices you've made and how professional you are, and in both sports and political broadcasting. Because I didn't know that you interviewed Magic Johnson. That's a great story. I'd love to hear more about that sometime. But yeah, we are in an oligarchy. Yeah, we're in an oligarchy, and it's still the same. And this kind of neo-fascist sort of style of governing, it really does benefit the top echelon, the billionaires, and the rest of us. We're getting screwed. We're getting stomped on. So I think I've seen a lot of history lately in my research on these kinds of issues, and it seems to me that not much has changed since the days of J.P. Morgan and Andrew Carnegie, and even. Yeah. You were talking about the 80s, with the Wall Street craziness going on there. So, I just saw a miniseries about, the people in the 80s who really blew it too, like Michael Milken, and Boesky and those guys. That's the character that I believe Michael Douglas plays is based on Boesky, who was just an outrageous Wall Street speculator who had no morals whatsoever, and made most of his money on inside trading. Although Joe Kennedy,
by the way, you could tie this to the Epstein thing too. That all those films are video of Trump and Epstein. That was in the 1980s. So that's Wall Street.
The heyday. Ronald Reagan, let him loose.
Yeah,
Ronald Reagan, let him loose. Yeah, get rid of all the things that, all the SEC rules that Joe Kennedy, Robert and John's father, whose sons were assassinated, they both, their father was the head of the SEC under FDR. Before that, he had been a speculator and not very ethical himself. But once he became head of the SEC, he started enforcing these rules. Well, when Reagan came along, it was like, no, we need to loosen all the regulation. We need to just let it fly. And we saw what happened after that, right? What happened during the big crash of 2008. And how long it took to get out of that, and Obama bailing out the rich and wealthy bankers and investment firms, but not so much the middle class or the poor. That was kind of a sellout.
Mr. Geithner, thank you very much. Right?
No, I mean, so we know what happened.
Yeah, it's really sad that when again, we cherish things, whether it's the sport of baseball or the great guitars that you're holding and so forth, and I just think that a lot of people like to say, oh, the future will be better, and talk about the future, and everybody's a Star Trekkie and all that stuff, which is fine, and that was a great series. but there are a lot of things in the past, and again, that we should cherish, including what Roosevelt brought us, including what Jackie Robinson in baseball brought us. I mean, and I just think that, you have to be, thinking through through the future glass here, and look back and take the good of the past, and leave the bad of it, behind, but don't throw everything out.
As you know, and you mentioned this a minute ago, one of my major missions as a journalist has been about press freedom. And, I was going to say, don't get me started, because I have a article at Truth Out all about media monopolies in the United States, and how long before Trump came along, it caused our rankings on the World Press Freedom Index, as compiled by Reporters Without Borders. Our ranking on the World Press Freedom Index has gone down steadily since 2002, and that was long before Trump came along. And a lot of that had to do with, two things. It had to do with the treatment of journalists by police at protests, because they were being pepper sprayed and tear gassed and arrested, me being among them. And also the media monopolies. There were so few people controlling so much of the media. It's only gotten worse. And that's one of the things that Reporters Without Borders would cite in their report on the United States, and why we're ranked 57th in the world in terms of press freedom. Is because of the media monopolies and now an anti-press government. So you can bet that on May 3rd, World Press Freedom Day, which no one in the U.S. press will report about, which is one of the biggest censored stories of the year. On World Press Freedom Day on May 3rd, when the World Press Freedom Index rankings for 2006 are released, that the United States is going to be much worse off, and a lot of other countries are going to be ahead of us. So yeah, this is a story I've been following for years as a journalist. I resent the fact I testified before the FCC on the negative effects of corporate media ownership consolidation, and it's a very serious issue. They suppressed some of their own research that they funded. There's also, I did some reporting for the Pacifica Radio Network on that, and also at Truth Out. So yeah, the FCC has, especially the Republicans on the FCC, mainly the Republicans, have for a long time really tried to help out their buddies in the mass media and in the commercial corporate media. And they continue to do that by granting them these huge mergers. The only difference now is that you have the head dictator now who gets to decide who gets the merger and who doesn't. And you have to pay him off with these large lawsuit settlements to, grease the wheels, so to speak, of that corruption in order to get these merger deals. So I'm seeing the future of corporate media as becoming less and less relevant and more and more ridiculous, so that it becomes a mouthpiece for the state. And that's something that, the United States has always prided ourselves on, at least as journalists. We've often been the mouthpiece of corporations like William Randolph Hearst and his newspaper chain. They were good at fake news, but we've always prided ourselves in not having a government-controlled, state-run media like they do have in Iran, or like they do have in Russia or China. But you know what?
Right.
What's the difference when it's
Soviet Union? Yeah.
Right. Well, what is the difference, though, when you have people in the government who are the regulators, who have an open door policy for all their corporate friends in the multinational corporations? And it all comes down to money. It's not about serving the public. It's not about informing the public. And as Thomas Jefferson said, in order to have a democracy, you have to have a well-educated and well-informed population of voters. So there you go. Unfortunately, only 40% of the American public actually, who's eligible to vote, actually does vote. And we have all these vote suppression movements going on the right side of the political spectrum, which, our friend Greg Palast talks a lot about. But, I think we have a lot of challenges to democracy, and seeing these corporate mergers in the media, I'm losing more and more faith in corporate media, Jeff. I'm beginning to be much more resigned and happy with the fact that I chose not to work in corporate media, and that I may have had to take a pay scale cut, but I'm
we
surviving.
All have, believe me.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is, though, is that there are people who have the opportunity, and I've mentioned this many times, in the Soros world. They control a network in Odyssey, and they could open up a lot. And in this day and age now, where you're losing CBS and you're losing CNN possibly now. And again, we'd love to have the Attorney General on in California, Mr. Bonta, who was talking to David Dayen about that and what they're going to look to do on this case. But the fact is that this is really a way to a dictatorship. This is Goebbels' and and the whole third right way of doing things. And people, I don't know how many people who may go to your concerts, at the concerts in Seattle, but I mean, if they knew that one day they're going to outlaw the great Bruce Springsteen or the great Pearl Jam or whatever, you can't hear that. I mean, don't forget, they have already banned books in this country, including Catcher in the Rye and a lot of great novels. And I just look at this and I'm thinking, we need to wake up. And I think that's what Nancy Pelosi was saying the other day, that we need to tell the American people, and I'm hoping my show is one of them, to inform people of what is at stake here. She's confident about what can be done in overcoming all this, because you still have MS Now, you still have what we do here, and there's Tom Hartman, and there's a handful of others, but that's about it. It is a handful. Yeah.
I've been preaching the importance of independent media for a long time too, and it's really hard to convince people that they need to start spending their money supporting their local broadcasters and people that they believe in, who they can trust, because there's fewer and fewer of them now in the corporate media. And we have to do this before the tipping point. So there's already right. enough people that we're getting 80,000, 100,000 people in the streets in Seattle on the No Kings marches, and we're having an event here on March 8th. Actually, there's a series of events around the world and around the country on International Women's Day. So watch for that, because the Women's March are planning a bunch of stuff. But we have enough people to get out in the streets and to try to stop some of this. But we have to do it now, because once there's that tipping point, and you see it in other countries, there's a great movie called Formosa Betrayed. You'll even see it in Taiwan, where the anti-communist government there actually started just cracking down on everybody and arresting everyone. Well, here you go. We're at this tipping point, and we got to hit it before the tipping point, before it becomes normalized, because people in these other countries, they don't fight back because they've been with it for so many years. They don't even see an alternative. We cannot let this country get there. We have to fight back now before it becomes a normal thing for federal agents to arrest people randomly. I mean, this cannot be normalized. And the kind of rhetoric that's coming from the White House cannot be normalized. And I'm expecting the United States media and journalists to stand up against it. But for the most part, the corporate media is not. They are serving as a mouthpiece, or as I said before, just stenographers.
Yeah, he said, she said. Look at the perfect example. We had this discussion the other day with one of our great contributors. Look what the whole thing about defund the police is. I mean, that's a complete made up right-wing talking point. And this is where, Joe Biden, he did a lot of great things, particularly in the first couple of years, American Rescue Plan, teaming up with Bernie and all that. But, when he would go on, and he never really did much after 8 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock at night, frankly. And he went on and he repeated the Republican talking point. Oh, we're not for defunding the police. Well, of course you're not. There's not one Democrat, I think it was Alan Grayson we had on yesterday, that actually talked about the idea of defunding the police. Nobody in their mind wants to basically say, okay, anarchy is fine. There's no law. But you don't want to have, out of control cops who in some cases are racist, not all, a lot of good cops out there, or people who basically don't, follow the law. We've seen what ICE has done. We've seen Rodney King. I mean, you go on and on and on. So you have to be able to have it, but you don't necessarily have to have a bunch of SWAT guys. I keep going back to the 80s show, Hill Street Blues. And, the great Daniel J. Trevante, playing, I think, Captain Furillo, he had a choice. You could go to the, Joe Spano was his name, the actor who played, the diminutive, negotiator. He was sort of the guy that would be brought out in whether a hostage case or whatever. And another individual, Joe Skian, who had his start, I think, way back in the 60s. I think he appeared in Hogan's Heroes, and I watched that show. And others, I think he was actually in Fever Pitch with our friend Fallon and Drew Barrymore, too. I think he played the father of Drew Barrymore in the movie. He was a SWAT team leader. So he wanted to go kick ass all the time. And that's not gonna improve the society, because most of the time that's not going anywhere. So that to me is the worry.
Yeah, you mentioned before Rodney King, and I'm sure that Donald Trump would accuse the Black Lives Matter protesters of being domestic terrorists. So we cannot let that become normalized either. We cannot become normal for a free speech activist or an anti-police brutality or anti-racist activist to be considered a domestic terrorist because they're speaking out against the government. I wanted to read something here. One of the stories I've been following is Ryan Schwank, the whistleblower that was testifying before Congress, before Senator Blumenthal's hearing, and Garcia from California. Here's a quote. He said, "Without reform, ICE will graduate thousands of new officers who do not know the limits of their authority or the constitutional duties and do not have the training to recognize an unlawful order." We're going to give them $75 billion?
Yeah,
we've only seen the tip of the iceberg, Jeff. This is going to get worse.
You can have DHS along the border. They don't belong in a place like Wisconsin, which is closer to the Canadian border than they do in the Mexican border. Hey, I just tell you, we have Bruce Springsteen. We have MS now. We have the Jeff Santos Show. We got Mark Taylor-Canfield doing everything else. So we're still out there, folks.
In Pioneer
Keep
Square.
hope alive.
Every art walk in Pioneer Square, I'm performing, sponsored by Emerald City Guitars, one of the best guitar shops in the world. And it's funny you mentioned this guitar stuff. People go back to the old guitars, Jeff. They want the old ones. So they pay money for that.
MTC, my man. We'll talk to you next Friday. Thank you, man. Have a great weekend. I want to thank Jalen for producing this broadcast, and of course, all the great team, the A-team, Rocky, Robin, Freddie S., and the rest of the game there in Boca. Folks, have a great weekend. Again, keep on fighting peacefully, non-violently. Until Monday, my name is Jeff Santos. I gotta go.